be a very busy time over the next several months for all these crews as they get ready for a series of different cargo vehicles coming and going, as well as a number of spacewalks coming up this year as well. And here inside the flight control room, Scott Stover, the flight director, is doing his final go, no-go for the release and departure of the Dragon spacecraft. And everybody reported back green as go. Stover is now talking with the SpaceX mission director and letting them know that everybody in Houston is ready for the next step. The release coming up a little bit less than 14 minutes from now, 5:56 a.m. Central Time. As we count down these final minutes to the release of the SpaceX Dragon 2, it's coming up at 5:56 a.m. Central Time, 6:56 a.m. Eastern Time. The recovery vessels are approaching the area at which Dragon will be splashing down 214 miles off the coast of Baja California. As we talked about earlier, this release and splashdown was due to take place yesterday, but as of Friday and into the weekend, the seas were fairly aggressive, for lack of a better word. The weather there in the splashdown area was not cooperative, both in terms of the spacecraft actually entering the ocean and as well as the vessels themselves actually departing the harbor and heading out to the landing site. It was going to be some 400 miles off the coast of Baja California, quite a ways out there. for the spacecraft to splash down. So whenever the weather did not cooperate, it delayed us to today, but there's actually a benefit to that because it's going to be splashing down 214 miles off the coast, which is almost half of what it was going to be if it would have taken place yesterday. So it makes it a bit easier for the recovery teams themselves. Also makes for a bit of a shorter trip to get all of this NASA and international partner science back to the port and also the airport that will fly those items back to Houston after they get Dragon back into port. So again, about 10.5 minutes now until the release. These recovery vessels are nearing where they need to be. SpaceX uses a 100-foot boat that has an A-frame on the back of it that helps lift the spacecraft up out of the water and store it on this sort of a flat deck of a ship. There's a 90-foot crew boat for telemetry operations so they can monitor the spacecraft as it comes back in, and two 24-foot rigid hull inflatable boats that help perform the recovery operations. SpaceX has about a dozen people, engineers and technicians that help support the actual recovery operations. There's a 4-person dive team that is used to go out there and stabilize the spacecraft and get it ready for the trip back home. As we've talked about before, there's sort of two different categories of cargo inside Dragon. There's that early return science that, as we mentioned, will be removed immediately once it gets back to the port in California. There will be a NASA plane at an airport nearby that will take a team of people with it who will accept the scientific samples that will immediately fly back to Houston same day as Dragon gets back into port. And all the rest of the cargo will stay inside the vehicle and will be trucked across country to McGregor, Texas, which is where SpaceX has a facility. And there will be a team from Houston that will go out there and recover the rest of the cargo as well. Here's a look at the departure and reentry flight path. The Dragon is currently holding between 10 and 15 meters away from the International Space Station. They will be releasing it in about 9 minutes. And then at that point, there will be 3 departure burns that will be conducted in fairly rapid succession to take Dragon away from the International Space Station. It'll cross that keep-out sphere, which is 200 meters away from the International Space Station. That will take place about 10 minutes after the release takes place, so at 6:06 a.m. Central Time. And then Dragon will be on its way. Our coverage here on NASA television will end soon after that, as soon as we cannot see the vehicle anymore. But of course, for all of the latest and to follow along with the actual reentry and the splashdown, just follow along with SpaceX's social media accounts as well as SpaceX.com. And of course, we'll have the latest on nasa.gov/station and all of NASA's various social media accounts as well. As you can see from the map here, we are nearing the point of the release. It'll happen just to the south of Australia. About 6.5 minutes from now, Scott Stover, the flight director on console, and his team are continuing to monitor as we count down these final minutes. This will be a crew-commanded maneuver where they will pull the trigger inside the robotic workstation to actually release the vehicle And then the SpaceX team will take over from there as they guide their spacecraft away from the International Space Station. This team here inside the room will continue working for the next couple of hours when they will be replaced by the Orbit 2 team. That'll be Tomas Gonzalez-Torres and his team that will work through the remainder of the crew's day. But they will start handover activities coming up in about an hour here inside this flight control room. This has been the home of the International Space Station since about 2006. It was a remodeled former Space Shuttle flight control room. This is the room that handled the majority of the early Space Shuttle missions, going all the way back to the first one, STS-1. It also handled Skylab and Apollo, one of the early Apollo missions, Apollo 7. All the rest of the Apollo missions, including 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, were handled upstairs from us, the room that's identical to this one. If you've ever been to Houston, you have seen it. It is the old historic Apollo Mission Control, which is just above our heads here. But on the wall here, quite a historic room. You see all the patches from all the different missions, including the assembly missions for the International Space Station. All the final Space Shuttle missions were handled hand in hand with the team here. And, of course, history being made with these commercial flights as well from inside this room. The Space Shuttle room, which of course is down the hall from us here, is undergoing a renovation of sorts. It is being retrofitted and refitted to handle the Orion flight, so that room getting quite a bit of a makeover as we work here from the Space Station Flight Control Room here inside the Mission Control Center.
Station on 2 from the cupola. We're in 1.320 and we're holding at the start of step 2.
Okay, copy. Continue to hold. We're working our last final steps here. Thank you.
Here's a look at what the crew is taking a look at inside the cupola. We're now 2.5 minutes away from release. They should be giving the crew a on-time release target coming up here shortly.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Tom and Chris. Houston and SpaceX are go for an on-time release at 10:56. At that time, you can perform steps 2 through 4 in 1.320 Dragon release and departure monitoring.
Okay, we copy. We hear the go for release on time, and we're starting into the steps so that we will actually press the trigger about on time.
Good readback. Thank you.
So 2 minutes until Dragon will be released from the arm of the International Space Station. The crew there reporting that they're working through the steps as we head on into sunset just to the south of Australia. There's a look at Chris Hadfield on the right, Tom Marshburn on the left, running through their checklists. They will be sending the command here shortly to release this vehicle and set it on its way toward a splashdown of the Pacific Ocean later on today at 11:34 a.m. Central Time. 1 minute to release. We will stand by and watch as Tom Hirschburn and Chris Hadfield get ready to release this vehicle. This Dragon spacecraft getting ready to return 2,668 pounds of supplies and science to Earth.